And let's bring in NBC News senior national security and intelligence analyst John Brennan. John, your reaction to these Israeli strikes inside of Iran, were you expecting them in these coming days here?
I think we've been anticipating them for the past couple of weeks. And I do think that there's been a sigh of relief in the White House, at least according to the early reports, that it appears that Bibi Netanyahu did not select the high option as far as retaliation, and he did not decide to go after the energy facilities, oil refineries, as well as possible nuclear sites, and has just kept it limited to military targets. And in Iran and around Tehran, there are readily identifiable Iranian military targets, whether it be airfields or weapon depots or training facilities and so on. And so it sounds as though Israel was going after Iran's capability to continue to launch these missile strikes against Israel. As Courtney pointed out, the Iranians have had an opportunity over the past couple of weeks to prepare for these strikes. But at the same time, the Israelis have very good intelligence and very, very formidable capabilities to carry out these precise attacks. And they were carried out at night, and there's been references to barracks, Iranian military barracks, whether they be the Iranian regular army military or Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC. And so I think one of the big questions is how many casualties were a result of these strikes. Now, unlike Hamas and Hezbollah, that have a lot of their members inside of civilian apartment buildings and areas, these Iranian military facilities are not commingled with civilian populations the way Hamas and Hezbollah have. So therefore, I'm hoping that the number of civilian casualties is at a minimum, if not none at all. So again, by the White House statement, these were targeted strikes against Iranian military targets that the Israelis carried out, and we'll have to see how the Iranians are going to respond. First, they will have some type of public statements, but hopefully it's not going to lead to the Iranians deciding that they now, as a result of these strikes, have to respond somewhat in kind.
And pick it up a little bit about the barracks, the possibility that barracks have been struck. I've been seeing unconfirmed reports, but the obvious target, or one of the most obvious targets, would have been the bases housing the Revolutionary Guard, right? So what would the Revolutionary Guard have done to prepare for a retaliation from Israel after the ballistic missile strikes in early October?
Well, they could have dispersed some of their forces that usually would be in barracks, and so maybe they moved them out and told them to stay home and try to have as few people as possible in these barracks that, again, are easily targeted by the Israeli military. And I'm hoping that the Israelis were not just trying to cause as many casualties as possible. They can do a lot of damage by destroying the infrastructure of Iran's military, again, airfields, the weapon depots, taking away the stockpiles that the Iranians have. But I think the Iranians, probably had some limited advance warning that these strikes were going to happen in terms of their air defense systems were alerted. So they could have taken some time to move some of these military members out of harm's way. We'll just have to wait and see with the day's break tomorrow to see what type of damage was done, and again on the casualty front, and whether or not there were some senior officers that were targeted. I heard references to Iranian military officers. So we'll have to see again just how significant the damage was.
And right now, as we wait and see, in Tehran and all around Iran, there are military leaders there that are discussing what a retaliation from them might look like, right? So given what they learned from the interceptions that happened during October 1st and that earlier missile strike, the ballistic missile strike, what do you think the options are that are on the table in Iran right now for retaliation in response to what we're seeing tonight?
Well, I think, as we mentioned before, but I think Matt as well as Courtney, the Iranian options are increasingly limited because a number of their proxies have been defanged as a result of Israeli military strikes inside of Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen, as well as inside of Iraq and now Syria as well. And the Iranians, I think, recognize that Israeli air defense systems are really, really tough to penetrate. As Courtney was mentioning, there's a real premium that the Israelis put on redundancy so that they have a lot of different capabilities to be able to intercept these rockets, missiles, and drones as they're coming in. And so I think the Iranians recognize that their ability to do damage inside of Israel proper is really quite limited. That's why the question of whether or not Iran is going to resort to some of its tactics that it's used in the past in terms of international terrorism. Hezbollah certainly has a terrorist capability, but I know that Israel is hardening some of their diplomatic facilities as well as taking the appropriate precautions. But again, in terms of Iran's military capabilities to lash out and damage the Israelis, it's limited at this point and probably decreasing as a result of Israel's continued the attrition that it is taking on Iranian military forces.
Now that we're hearing that energy sites may not have been struck, that oil refinery depots, and that this might not have been targeting of infrastructure, do you think that there's a possibility still that Iran may try to retaliate by disrupting supply chains that go into Israel?
Well, it's certainly a possibility, but again, I think we have to wait to find out exactly how much damage was done. And the more damage done, I think the more pressure there's going to be on the Iranian leadership. There is a new Iranian president. He is known as a bit of a reformer, but he doesn't basically make the decisions as far as the military posture to take. The supreme leader, Khamenei, as well as with the senior military leadership, I think they're the ones that are going to determine whether or not there is a possible effective means that Iran can respond or retaliate. But I don't think at this point Iran really wants to get into an escalatory spiral with Israel, which could in fact bring in the United States, because Iran will lose in that scenario. So therefore, I think they're going to see what they can do without sparking some type of regional conflagration that will damage them certainly more than others. But yes, it's one of the things that they could do. In the past, they have put mines in the Persian Gulf and even in the Red Sea in years past to try to interrupt international shipping as a way to signal that they do have a capability themselves. But again, I think that they're probably scratching their heads at this point to decide how they're going to respond. Maybe they're going to do it, again, in an asymmetric way because they know that their ability to get through Israeli air defenses has proven to be quite hapless in the past.
If they do continue to escalate, but they escalate through their proxies, how do you see that impacting, I hate to say it, but the election is right around the corner here in the United States. How do you see it impacting politics here at home?
Well, again, I think a lot depends on how escalatory this becomes. I know the Biden administration certainly has been doing everything possible to try to bring the bloodshed and the fighting to a close. And I think they would like to be able to get back to the idea of a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as a ceasefire even in Lebanon, and to get the hostages home. But if this continues to escalate, it's difficult for me to see how there's going to be some type of ceasefire either in the Gaza front or in Lebanon. So I do worry that a continued escalation here is just going to, I think, be used as a way to show that U.S. influence in the region to be able to stop this is not as great as maybe it once was.
John Brennan, we always appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.